The US and Ukraine have now signed an agreement granting America access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals. Ukrainian officials say this deal is a 50-50 partnership with no debt obligations for Kyiv either.
Sure. And they all lived happily ever after and everyone clapped. Or not. Because regardless of how Kiev and Washington may try to spin this as some sort of win-win, look at him trying to hide his smirk, look at her trying to mask her existential despair. We all know exactly what is happening here. It is an epic shakedown. Here's what the US is getting out of it. Titanium, zirconia, graphite, lithium, rare earth minerals, oil and gas. Know where most of those things are needed? In the manufacture of AI microchips and new energy vehicles. The two industries where the US is still willing to back its ability to go toe-to-toe with China. In other words, Ukraine has just spent 11 years getting instigated by the US to fight different stages of the world's least winnable war against a next-door neighbor that has over 4,000 nuclear warheads, losing over 700,000 men in the process, according to Donald Trump, only to end up with less territory than before the 2014 coup, a growing diaspora of refugees and sex workers, and the ultimate industrial stimulus package for the US. What on earth did they get out of it? The same thing that the Democratic Republic of Congo is about to get out of the very similar deal that Trump is pushing to sign with them. A few details are different here and there, but the general gist is the same. Completely destabilize a country by funding subversive elements to either pick up arms and create a civil war, or get you into a pointless war with your neighbor who can swat you like a fly. When your country predictably goes up in flames, you then give me mining rights to those minerals under your soil that I want. And I put weapons and soldiers in your country to keep you safe from the war that I created and still sustain. You get what looks like protection, and I get what I want. Everyone goes home happy. It's exactly like what the New York Italian mafia used to do to small business owners.
To extort the owner, you got to convince him that it's in his interest to pay us. Capiche? Some folks will listen to reason. Others, well, you're going to have to apply pressure.
Think about it. It's cheaper than building infrastructure in exchange for those resources like the Chinese do. Why should I bother trying to create a win-win when I can simply win and you can lose? Bear in mind, in both instances, I've made sure to install a hapless puppet without any grounding in diplomacy or geopolitics as the leader of the country with the resources that I want. So the guys in Europe get a comedian who used to dance on TV, and the guys in darkest Africa get a former pizza delivery driver who used to work at this pizzeria in Brussels. The comedian from Kiev tries his hardest to roleplay at being presidential, but he's still effectively a clown. While the pizza boy from Brussels doesn't even bother trying to roleplay because he's also a clown, but not the funny kind. Now, smile for the camera and try to hide your existential despair. And on the plus side, hey, look, I'm not racist anymore. I'm doing it to white people now.
Michelle Obama blasts Donald Trump's immigration policies, claiming that his mass deportation program keeps her up at night.
Well, in this current climate for me, it's, what's happening to immigrants. And I don't know that we will have the advocates to protect everybody. And that frightens me. It keeps me up at night.
Ma'am, do you know who your husband was? Barack Obama was the deporter-in-chief, and he deported more people than Donald Trump. This is why Democrats are so disgusting. They only care to claim about human rights when a Republican is in charge. Because you will never know it if you listen to Democrats. But ICE raids happened under Barack Obama and Joe Biden as well, including Americans being detained by ICE. These people who was kidnapped by ICE was often detained for months, even years, until it was proved they was here illegally. And the amount of people that was detained by ICE was doubled under Joe Biden compared to Donald Trump.
Okay, well, I got it. We'll do that too, kid, but let me finish my speech.
I want to know if you are committed to stopping all deportations and detentions of your elected president.
No. What I will.
3 million deportations under the Obama administration. Apologize now. Apologize now. 3 million deportations under the Obama administration. Apologize now. Apologize now.
Well, you should vote for Trump. You should vote for Trump.
Joe Biden also funded ICE $6 billion more than Donald Trump. And under Joe Biden's ICE, human rights violations was rampant, where ICE was accused of using forced slave labor. There was also a rampant problem of sexual abuse under Joe Biden's ICE, where there was hundreds of migrants who complained about being sexually assaulted by ICE, who was never given justice. Notice how Michelle Obama's heart wasn't breaking at any of this? The only reason why Donald Trump feels worse is because Democratic Party operatives and the corporate media is humanizing the victims of Donald Trump's immigration policies. When a Republican is in charge, you know the names, you know the stories of the people who are victims of United States policy. You guys wouldn't know the name or hear the stories of people like Abrego Garcia if a Democrat was in charge. Michelle Obama wouldn't give a fuck. And this dynamic is exactly why the Democratic Party is the most effective evil.
What's poppin', people? Welcome to RBN Saturday Live. I've been enjoying doing these. What's poppin', my friends, my family? You guys know I had to show you guys my brother David Hundeyin, who will be joining us in around an hour because we're gonna talk about the absolute legend, the living legend that we have witnessed the birth of a true revolutionary leader that has united Africa in a way I've never seen in my entire life. And this happened ever since Ibrahim Traore kicked out the corrupt French government, U.S. enabling government that ruled before in 2002. And ever since Ibrahim Traore has taken over, we have seen attempt after attempt on his life. I believe the number is at 20. Let me know in the chat, guys. I think that they had 20 assassination attempts. Last year, the legend of Ibrahim Traore grew as one of the closest assassination attempts on him last year was thwarted because the military refused to engage in the Ivory Coast conspiracy for the people on the inside to assassinate him. The people who have fled to the Ivory Coast, which is led by a French puppet government president. And ever since then, we've seen the West trying to undermine him because Ibrahim Traore has kicked out the West. And we're going to discuss the legend of Ibrahim Traore. And I've been wanting to do this stream a long time. So I was like, let's do this on the Saturday show. I got my boy David Hundeyin join us. He's an amazing journalist. And I'm loving the work we're doing at Hotspot. Hotspot is elevating Black anti-imperialist content creators like myself, David, Nico House. One day I'm going to do a stream with all three of us. But David, he will be joining us here later, maybe in the next hour or so. I know he said we was going to do this a little bit earlier. I pushed the stream back. I know he said he was stuck in traffic, but he will be joining us. He's definitely going to be a regular on RBN. I love David. I love his work that he does with West Africa Weekly. They're one of my sources when I'm reading about Africa. Black Agenda Report. Big shout out to them. Let me share their article. They have a fantastic article. Maybe I'll get a little bit too ahead of myself because we will cover this. Big shout out to my sister, Mari Kimberly, Ajama Baraka, all our Black elders who always had RBN's back from day one. You guys know we love Black Agenda Report. Big shout out to Ann Garrison, a friend of mine. I love Ann Garrison. And we're going to discuss this. This is going to be the theme of this show. We will get to this here very soon. The legend of Ibrahim Traore, which we have seen over the last 2 years, over the last 3 years now. Jesus, the world turns fast, man. So David will be joining us. I can't wait to get his perspective. I may be touching base on that as well, but I want to get back to this because I had this hotspot video. Because I have seen this coordinated effort by the establishment. It's been revealed that they're USAID funded, CIA funded. These Black liberals who try to destroy Pan-Africanism. You have a lot of these like FBA, people who move and operate like a Fed wants someone to. I won't say they're Feds, but they are definitely Fed friendly. You know what I mean? These people are not protesting the police state. There's been a coordinated effort to divide Black Americans with Africans because they realize the danger would be if Black people united and wasn't divided under these imperialist flags, wasn't divided by CIA funded gang wars like the Crips and Bloods, who was funded by the CIA to destabilize our communities. So the ruling class, as David Hundeyin explained last time he was on RBN, what they want is an unstable Africa. They want a disjointed, black capitalist, black dysphoria. The black capitalism that boomers embraced, the black capitalism that black Gen X embraced, destroyed our communities, rotted the minds of our people. Black capitalism turned many people in the black ruling class. They might as well have a Klan hood on. These people are hardcore Zionists. The strongest supporters of the NATO-Ukraine proxy war you will find are in the Black Congressional Caucus. Black Congressional Caucus that is 100% okay with building cop cities to implement Zionist authoritarianism on our people as they vote for pro-genocide arms deal to the Israelis to slaughter people in Gaza. You want to know who oppose the slaughter of the people in Gaza? Our brothers and sisters in Africa. You have judges, lawyers, legal experts in South Africa that became victims and targets of the entirety of the West because they brought Israel to the International Court of Justice and they won. South Africa, my black brothers and sisters, feels good, are leading the charge against the genocidal Zionist scourge that's slaughtering babies, torturing doctors, bombing hospitals, executing journalists, like the greatest scourge of all time. South Africa is standing up for that, not the Black Congressional Caucus, not Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama, her heart weeps because of Donald Trump's immigration policy, even though she was married to the deporter-in-chief herself. So you know what keep me up at night? I'm very careful on scroll Twitter. I've seen way too many dead babies because of Christian Zionists and the Zionist scourge arming Israel to the teeth. I said it before, like, the humanity never going to be the same again. This is the most live-streamed, barbaric act of war we have ever seen. Like, they dropped more bombs on Gaza than the entirety of Europe in World War II. They flattened and destroyed Gaza with giant 2,000-pound bombs. We have seen more children die in Gaza over the last year and a half, more than all children combined in all war zones over the last 10 years, 4 times over. 4 times over. Take all the children who died in Gaza, compare that to every child that died in every war over the last 10 years, including their precious Ukraine war, then multiply that number by 4 to 5. That's how many children the Black Congressional Caucus sponsors killing in Gaza. That doesn't keep Michelle Obama up at night, though. This is the new leader of the young Black Congressional Caucus, the new rising star that's been all over liberal media, that's been trending all the time. She's the #1 target of MAGA. She's Rachel Maddow's favorite. She supports the Nazis in Ukraine. She supports funding genocide in Gaza. And she's supposed to be the young Black progressive. My brother, do you guys understand how much Black capitalism and Black neoliberalism completely rotted the brains of many people in our community? This is Jasmine Crockett. This is AOC's friend. And people wonder why AOC is getting booed and mocked at Gaza protest.
Governments for Israel to wage these military campaigns, as you know, having voted for the National Security Supplemental back in April, which underwrote Israel's war effort.
I absolutely did vote for it. I voted for that along with every other supplemental that was available.
I absolutely did vote to fund the mass slaughter of Palestinians. Meanwhile, the Black Congressional Caucus, Black neoliberal media and corporate media, they're shooting her to the moon. This genocidal psychopath. Yeah, I voted for all the death and destruction we see in Israel.
National Security Supplemental back in April, which underwrote Israel's war effort.
I absolutely did vote for it. I voted for that along with every other supplemental that was available. And I will tell you this. It is important that people understand what diplomacy looks like. And it looks like the fact that this relationship between Israel and the United States has existed since before I was born.
So her argument for why she supports genocide, and this is the most intellectual person you will find in the Black Congressional Caucus. This is the height of thought and conversation that goes on in the mind of Black liberalism. We supported them before. We are pro-genocide. They are pro-imperialism. We support before. I'm not coming here to rock the boat. I'm trying to get paid. I'm not here to follow the traditions of our revolutionary ancestors. Like Fred Hampton, who stood up for the Palestinian people. Like our brothers and sisters in Africa, who's risking it all, who is now facing the brunt force of the Trump administration and Western imperialism. Because they dare challenge Israel. That's why Donald Trump is going after South Africa. Because South Africa successfully sued Israel. So these freedom fighters in Africa, they had nothing to lose. But the Black capitalist class has completely rotted the minds of the entirety of the bourgeoisie class in our community. Where they're just supporting imperialism. Colin Powell said it best, and this is the mantra of the Black capitalists, that we can escape the chains of our exploitation if we join the exploiter. Oh, come on, man. Racism isn't real. Don't you know all you gotta do is join the military-industrial complex and help us slaughter innocent people. Then you'll be moving on up. Moving on up. That's how you move up. Here's Jasmine Crockett. Once again, this is very standard. Raphael Warnock, the Black pastor that got credibility in the hip-hop community, he fucking all for the Ukraine war. Funding band-right Nazis, where even the Peace Corps send a warning, and I posted this thousands of times on Twitter, that they will call you the N-word, they will call you a monkey. The fascist state that banned the right to collective bargaining. The state that banned socialist parties. Who else did that, fam? For all my history bros. The Nazis in Germany. One of the first things they did was ban the right to collectively bargain, form a union, and they banned all actual opposition against the capitalist element that was funding the fascism, which is the working class. Which is why it's always stupid when you hear the Zionist enablers like Nick Fuentes and them say that Hitler was a secret communist and socialist. Very weird for Hitler to be a secret socialist when he's the one who fucking locked up and prosecuted union organizers. That's a very weird communist, isn't it? These are the people that Ukrainians look up to. This is the ideology that Ukrainians has followed, the Banderite fascist suppression of the working class and any minority groups. I know maybe I shouldn't be telling you guys this stuff because I'm too online, I guess, because I like to see what other people say, guys. You guys know I like to analyze what other political minds are thinking. And then I look at American politics and I'm like, man, everyone is unserious. Like that's the intellectual take, like the MAGA Nick Fuentes intellectual is that Hitler is actually a secret Jew communist. Like, that's the best you're going to get on the right. The people who oppose Israel, they accuse Hitler of being some secret fucking Jew-loving communist who was following Marx. It's like incoherent, ahistorical, but hey, that's how white people tell history. That's how these black congressional caucus bums tell history too. Let me make this abundantly clear. As this administration keeps embarrassing and endangering us on all levels, I vehemently disagree with standing with Russia. I am standing with Ukraine. President Zelensky and Ukrainian people, full stop. Zoya's love, Zoya's life. I'm gonna see how many comments I can show today. I'm doing an hour solo before my guest is scheduled to arrive. We'll get to Traore here soon. I will be interviewing David from West Africa Weekly. Very, very prominent investigative reporter and my friend. We got him working. We got him at Hotspot doing amazing work. Speaking of Hotspot, this is back to Michelle Obama, because the theme of the show is how I'm an unapologetic critic of ADOS and FDA. I'm ratioed and went after these people on Twitter all the time. They reject Pan-Africanism because they like black capitalist ops, like Fed adjacent, because that's exactly what the ruling class want. I am an unapologetic Pan-Africanist. I am supportive of class warfare against the traitorous elements in our community that join the capitalist class that do nothing but exploit our labor. So we guys, if you don't know what I'm talking about, we've seen a record amount of black millionaires over the last few decades. But the difference between black and white and racial disparity is higher right now than it has been since the civil rights era. Wait. That doesn't add up, doesn't it? It doesn't. Because what do black capitalists do? Black capitalists exploit black labor. And black boomers and Gen Xers, they was misled into thinking that capitalism is a form of liberation. It is not. Self-determination, begging to be fucking accepted and join the white capitalist class as a DEI hire. They advocate for DEI, affirmative action, and these liberal bullshit policies is not the path to our liberation. I'm in support of us having self-determination, taking control of our own communities, putting our economic prosperity in our own hands by seizing the means of production. The Obamas are police state supporters. The capitalist class supported this. And they wouldn't begin, and I'm going to get back to the topic. I'm ranting a lot here. But here's back to the topic here of Obama, who has done a ton of damage to our community. Like Barack Obama normalized neocon ideology among the black suburban community. Black Americans always been the most vehemently anti-war, especially led by Muhammad Ali in Vietnam, where he said, Viet Cong never called me nigger. We spoke out against, like, we historically always been anti-war, especially with George W. Bush Jr. and the war on terror. That's where you had a lot of black politicians, that before the Democratic Party went fully crazy, where they would pretend to be against the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war. Barbara Lee, for example. The tradition was, hey man, black people generally against war. Then Obama came in and completely flipped it on its head, where black people are unapologetically imperialists. Now we got Jasmine Crockett. Now we got Cory Booker, who literally have secret meetings with convicted war criminals. He met with Ben Gvir. He met with Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the state of the black ruling class. And I'm covering this for a reason, because I'm showing you guys the difference between the black ruling class, the black capitalist class, and the United States, and what they have developing with Ibrahim Traore, and what happens when you follow a revolutionary. And Ibrahim, in my estimation, is a revolutionary communist leader. He is nationalizing public resources, modernizing education and infrastructure. He has expelled the imperialists. He's the ideal communist revolutionary. That's why they panicking. He explained before that in order to lead to prosperity, revolution comes out so we won't have the exploitation of the Western security state that is exploiting our people. Now he's nationalizing the resources. We are seeing real revolutionary ideology being spread in Africa, which leads to the stage to Michael Lanley, the black Africom general who was recently, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. Pete Hegseth fired him because he's accused him of being a DEI hire. We get to that here soon. There's a lot of people get complained because I roast. People get mad like, Nick, why are you always talking shit about white people? As you guys see, I'm more than happy with holding my community accountable, as I do all the time, who embraced Barack Obama-style neoliberalism over MLK-style socialism, Fred Hampton-style radicalism, over our revolutionary leaders who outright spelled out how the capitalist class are pigs, like Malcolm X. Malcolm X says, show me a capitalist, and I will show you a bloodsucker. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that every single person in the Black liberation movement was radical anti-capitalist, but they definitely wasn't pro-capitalist. They definitely was fucking red friendly. They also always ignore that Malcolm X was a big Stalinist. Like if Malcolm X and Fred Hampton was alive today, they would call him also a tankies. Vosh made a hate video on Fred Hampton every single goddamn day. Can you imagine the kind of monkey and fucking slurs that Vosh, Hassan, and them would call Fred Hampton and Malcolm X tanky ass if they was live today? And people wonder why we got our politics. People wonder why we call ourselves Fred Hampton leftists. Big plug, by the way, July, me and Rome is having a mutual aid event with Fred Hampton Jr. as well. Super excited about that. That would give me purpose, just following in the footsteps of our revolutionary leaders. Pessimism is for the birds. Pessimism is for the people who just surrender to a life of antidepressants, misery, and surrender. We should, trust me, I know it may sound cliche, but fighting gives you purpose, my friends. Nothing make you feel better than organizing a mutual aid event, meeting your neighbors, and rejecting your mind being colonized. Like the entirety of the Black capitalist class. And I promise you, all these suburbanites, all these Black Ivy League traitor scumbags, they are the motherfuckers who have the most antidepressant use. They are the people who are the most miserable. Because they'll stand there in their empty ass house as a sellout, realizing that they're still gonna die younger than the average white American. Our life expectancy is much lower here. All right, let me get through some receipts. I guess I'll read these super chats I've seen real quick, since I'm pretty much just ranting for the hour till my friend David get here. You guys see what I'm building with this stream, though, right? I'm building to the Ibrahim Traore. This is our critique of the Black capitalist class. Traore is the Lumumba of our generation. Like, I've seen the hype in the comments. We got a good showing today on X and YouTube. 800 people live on both. So a lot of people have been looking forward to this episode. I've been wanting to do this episode for a while. I'm glad I finally got a chance. I'm glad I'm able to have my brother David, who will be joining us in around 30 minutes, I believe. I recommend JB's videos, reading the Book of Water and Spirit, an autobiography of a shaman from Burkina Faso named Milan Doma Same, I believe. Thank you guys for the super chat. Let me get back to the receipts. You guys know Saturday streams is mostly the streams where I come and engage in weekly therapy sessions. It's usually my rant stream. So even though our guest is coming a little bit later, I need about an hour to cook anyway, because it's a lot to cover. Apparently, I need to look more into the Trump administration, is ending diplomacy, expenditures in majority of Africa, especially with the rise of Ibrahim Traore and how their attempts to destabilize Burkina Faso has ended in tragedy for them. Let's sing some more. I know Roman dropping the mixtape. I told Rome, give me a bar, bro. Let me get a bar. When you see people call themselves revolutionary, always talking about destroying, but never talking about building or creating, they're not revolutionary. Very well said, Zoya. Zoya is love. Zoya is life. Look, my friend. They do not understand the first thing about revolution is creating. This is my good friend. This is someone I look up to a lot, Kwame Traore, the late great Kwame Traore. Big shout out to Zoya's love, Zoya's life. Let me get back to the topic here. Because one of the reasons why I find liberals generally disgusting, and it's so crazy that people continue to fall for this pattern every time it happens. Like, they only care about stuff when a Republican is in charge. They only care about immigration. They only care about police violence. All the things that people claim of the liberal class. You will hear social democrats like Kyle Kulinski, Crystal Voss. They will say, well, it's better for us to organize with liberals because at least they share some of our beliefs, right? No, jackass. They are class enemies the same as conservatives. They only care about these human rights issues as a way to gain and maintain power. Right now, you guys know the name of Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man that Donald Trump was deported. And people say, oh my God, I know that we deport people too. I know we're white supremacists, but don't you know that's different? That's different. He was an American. He was here legally. He didn't have due process. You have grown-ass men who be making this argument as if they was born yesterday. Big shout out to Put Dems Left, who've been highlighting this as well. Both parties have been disappearing U.S. citizens for years. The only silver lining to Trump continuing this abhorrent practice is that now people are finally paying attention. Of the 5.3 million people that Obama deported, you got to know that Trump deported around 1.7, 1.8. Obama destroyed that bum when it comes to immigration numbers. The way that Biden defeated him as well. The same way that Biden funded ICE $6 million more. You don't know, you would never know this if you would follow TYT or any sort of Democrat media. If you follow David Pakman, you would never know this shit. They'll pretend, oh my God, fascism is here. Don't you know that fascism is here because Donald Trump is putting rookie numbers up. Michael Jordan, fucking Barack Obama was Michael Jordan of deporting people. This motherfucker wasn't missing. Barack Obama deported around 53,000 to 79,000 Americans. And you guys don't know a single name of any of these people. These liberals that talking about Abrego Garcia don't know any of these. Because you guys see what liberal class do. They humanize the victims of Republicans' policies. Then when a Democrat is in charge, I've been covering the crimes of Joe Biden ICE the entirety of my time as a citizen journalist. That's why I was screaming at MAGA people who was pretending that Biden has some open border. I'm like, dude, he's funding border more than Trump. This is the result of U.S. imperialism and poor regional planning by the ruling class, sanctions that destabilize economies, coups on governments that put corrupt capitalist leaders that led to despair and poverty in their country. That is the cause of the mass migration crisis, and you're not going to solve it by building a police state. Both parties are the same damn thing. Big shout out to Landra. I appreciate the generous super chat, brother. Ibrahim Traore is exactly what Mark spoke about. Told you guys, I'm not sure what they label themselves, but as someone who know a little bit, I definitely would label this motherfucker a Marxist revolutionary. The ideal modern communist. Ibrahim Traore is exactly what Marx spoke about in Economic Evolution from end-stage capitalism to socialism. But not only does Landrew lead great super chats, he has great content in the super chat as well. This is, boy, Landrew speaking. Free Palestine, the new Palestine, one country with human rights for all. Very well said. I believe Burkina Faso is around 70% Muslim, 20% Christian, so that definitely makes sense. Captain Traore story study. Yeah, I thought so. I didn't want to say for sure because I wanted to be careful, but I'm pretty sure these motherfuckers are Marxists, but I didn't want to say for sure. What I also been covering and what people like Democracy Now! What they used to pay attention to before Trump derangement syndrome destroyed the channel. Now look at the date of this. This is February 2021 when Joe Biden is in charge. Now look at the headline. This is Biden's ICE. ICE has deported dozens of people to Haiti since Biden's inauguration, including babies as young as 2 months old. Biden deported babies, fam. And AOC supported. AOC was an enthusiastic Biden supporter. Bernie Sanders was an enthusiastic Biden supporter as Biden was deporting babies. But Bernie gonna challenge the oligarchy by endorsing Pete Buttigieg in a few years. And you're not hearing a damn word. You're not hearing a damn thing about this. Guys, as a corporate media hawk, I watch them like a hawk. The difference between the MSNBC coverage right now compared to Biden is night and day, fam. It's literally creepy. I don't know if you guys know, CNN is in the toilet. MSNBC is actually killing the game again because of Donald Trump. And MSNBC have done segments discussing Gaza. A lot of ways that piss me off, but they will bring up the plight of the Palestinians like I would never see before. They bring on immigration activists on. Bro, they never did that under Biden. It is so creepy to see it in real time as someone who's like a propaganda scientist in a way. I've been covering this for years now. The coverage is so different. But at least Democracy Now! Was still covering this under Biden. ICE has deported dozens of people to Haiti since Biden's inauguration, including babies as young as 2 months old. We continue to witness the same draconian, the same cruel, and humane practices that President Trump left behind. So, and I explained this many times before on RBN. Throughout the entire years I was covering the Biden administration, I explained to you guys Trump derangement syndrome is silly because of Biden continued Trump foreign policy. You have people in Cuba that was explaining how Biden Cuban policy not only continued Donald Trump's, he expanded it and made it even more harsh. You have people in Iran that said that Biden continued Donald Trump's hardline stance against Iran. Now Trump is trying to get into a nuclear deal that even Biden and Blinken said he wasn't supportive of. And that's why it kills me. You still see these people that are still playing the red-blue game to this day. The pendulum swinging back to the Democrats. People say, oh my God, this is why we got to support Democrats because Trump is a fascist. The same thing happening under the Democratic Party. They were literally deporting babies. This is AOC's party. Jasmine Crockett, the person we showed who was supporting genocide, that's AOC's friend. AOC gives Jasmine Crockett a shout out all the time. They like real close friends. So I have a question for you guys. What do you call someone who is friends with a Nazi and they support Nazis, what do you call someone who endorses a Nazi and enables the rise of political power? You would call that person a Nazi, right? Imagine if someone supported King Leopold and it was like, yeah, I am a staunch supporter of the royal throne. I support King Leopold. Yeah, I disagree with what he did what he's doing in the Congo. Yeah, I disagree with the genocide of the Congo, but I like fucking King Leopold. You guys understand that is AOC with Biden on Gaza. You had a report, and I showed it before on RBN, how you had former Israeli president and Israeli officials that was pushing back on right-wingers who said that Biden wasn't good for Israel. Because they explained that not once, unlike Trump, not once did Biden ever ask for a ceasefire. Not once did Kamala Harris ever put pressure on for a ceasefire. Then, during the campaign, as you have Palestinian Democrats begging to be seen, Kamala essentially told him, like, hey, man, I married my AIPAC handler husband, Doug Emhoff. He's a fucking Zionist. There is no way I'm changing the policy. You guys realize that, right? Kamala's like, bro, I'm going to directly continue the policies. Biden was the most hardcore Zionist in the Senate, and AOC supported him. Joe Biden is the butcher of Gaza. You guys realize that there has never been a president that has ever been worse in Gaza in American history. Since 1948, since the original sin of the Nakba, there have never been a president as bad as Joe Biden because he was the president when Israel finally destroyed it. Gaza was leveled under Joe Biden. He is the King Leopold of Gaza. Because, we are actually smart. We understand that a Zionist entity and the United States empire entity is connected. That Israel is a colonial project of the United States. That it's ran by two figureheads. You have Benjamin Netanyahu, he lives in the settler colonial state, and you have whoever the president in the White House. That's how our imperialist system works. So that's why anyone who actually cares, anyone who actually seen the murder and destruction of children and the entirety of the people, which the Biden administration enabled, you had Jewish people in Biden's administration who was resigning because he explained that there's a culture of racism in the Biden administration and the Democratic Party. This is the people that AOC supported. That's why we are seeing AOC in town halls getting booed by intelligent anti-genocide protesters. This video is glorious. I still got some time for my guests here too. But you already know it's Saturday. We all cook. But let's play the video.
Really hard to defend and you know what you're doing about the genocide in Gaza.
This is the party that Hassan Piker believes that we're going to reform. This is the party that Status Quo, TYT, all these people believe that we're going to fucking reform. The party that will boo someone that calls out a genocide supporter. Can you imagine if that crowd was filled with RBN supporters? Unlike the people who, like, you guys realize all the AOC supporters, they hate my guts. I'm blocked by half of them. All the AOC people, Sam Cedar, Majority Report, TYT, they all fucking hate my guts. They love AOC. Hassan Piker loves AOC. Hassan Piker, he said he hates Jill Stein. Hassan Piker hates Jill Stein, but he loves AOC, the Zionist enabler. That's why Hassan Piker smeared us. You guys understand the class dynamics that's going on, where many U.S. leftists are still asleep about it? The party that you guys are trying to reform is booing the anti-genocide activists. If this was the Arban community and we were sitting there the same way that the Arban community showed up at the Green Party rally where I gave my speech to hundreds of people in that church, we would have stood with her. If I was there, I would have stood with her and backed her up. gave her some technical support. But this is the Democratic Party. And this is the point that my friend Kid from Due Distance made on Post-Duopoly show. Many of the progressives, many of the DSA style people, they miscalculated because they assumed that Democrats are good people. Like them 25% unmovables who support the Democratic Party. Like, oh, if we just show them the way, if we out debate them, if we imply empathy and we join and lock hands with people, they will join our side. Delusional. That's the theory of change that people like Hassan Piker has, that people like AOC has. Literally the people who killed it, David Pakman, Rational National, Vanguard, these channels doing better than ours. Just to highlight how cooked the United States left is. This is the popular opinion in the United States left is that we got to lock arms with the genocidal maniacs who boo an anti-genocide activist. They booing them. Bro, how is this any different from red? Like once again, this is Blue MAGA. This is a right-wing, genocidal, racist party that is mass booing and jeering someone who is calling for the end of killing kids. And it's not like this is a Chuck Schumer rally, fam. You know, they like, don't you know that AOC and Bernie, they are the left of the Democratic Party. This is not a Chuck Schumer rally. This is an AOC rally. You guys realize an AOC rally, you know, the quote-unquote progressive wing of the Democratic Party, it looks like a fucking Klan rally. Look at these Karen fucks in the crowd yelling at her. Look at this little queen here. Look at this queen. This is do people even want to form a coalition with these people? These are the people that Hassan Piker and then want to form a coalition with. This is crazy. Well, she's not like a right-wing troll that came up and say fuck Muslims like I seen right. She said, hey guys, you are supporting a genocidal party. She's calling for ending the slaughter of children, and the crowd is furious at her. And you want to know who the average AOC supporter is at this point? Because after this video went viral, there was all these liberal MSNBC watching Zionists who they are the new AOC supporters. AOC is like one of the top 5 candidates in 2028 polling. AOC has a completely demographic. People thought I was just talking shit when I said Bernie and AOC supporters are just MSNBC watching white boomers. They have black Zionists. Like, this guy is literally a Zionist bot. He has a pager celebrating Israeli terrorism in his profile picture. He has a flag of Israel. quote unquote Washington correspondent. You guys see it? This is what I was just talking about. The moral depravity of black Zionists. A black man with an Israeli flag, or blackish, I don't fucking know. If even AOC is being targeted by these Gaza protesters, then it's clear that there's no appeasing them and they should be ignored. These are deranged people. Said the guy with a pager emoji celebrating children getting bombed and scarred for life. So they say, oh my God, if you are against genocide, leave our party. We need to start reaching out to them. Once again, if you're not following me on X, bro, I'm ratioing these Zionists left and right every single day. So once again, I get the easiest ratio of my life by simply saying to this guy who is calling for the Democratic Party to ignore peace activists, which trust me, they are. If you want to ignore Gaza protesters and continue to boo them, you guys realize we love these videos. These videos, and this is why what Jose does with all these people protesting the squad and Democrats, what they're doing, they're exposing the Democratic Party base and their politicians as well. And despite what Democrat media refuses to tell you, exit poll after exit poll after exit poll keeps showing how the number one reason that Biden lost was because of Gaza. So I said, you guys ignored the Gaza protesters last election and lost the popular vote, but go ahead, proceed. I'm down with never seeing Democrats win again. They doubling down on their Zionism, guys. I wonder, I know he probably got racial now, but man, the liberal, yeah, they going after him now, but the liberal comments in response to AOC being booed is incredible. They're like, oh my God, see this, the left would even go after AOC as if AOC is our ally. At best case scenario, they're not only extremely dumb, but malicious. You guys realize, for all the people that say, oh my God, why are you protesting AOC? Don't you know AOC is pro-Palestine? There's all these dummies. These are the people who watch Hassan Piker. These are the people why these people are the reason why the United States left is so fucked. Hassan Piker gets tens of thousands of views. He plays video games with AOC. He does streams with AOC, softball interviews with AOC and Bernie Sanders. Normalize these Zionist scumbags to his giant audience. And then he says he hates Jill Stein because he accuses Jill Stein of being a grifter with no evidence. He spreads the lie that Jill Stein doesn't do anything. You guys realize that Jill Stein was arrested? You guys realize that Jill Stein was arrested protesting the genocide in a very brutal fashion? I had a conversation with her about it. So Jill Stein, who was violently arrested protesting against the Biden administration, she's bad, according to the most famous left-wing streamer in the United States. She's bad. But the person who literally enables Zionists and signed, you realize that AOC voted yes for the anti-Semitism resolution, which conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And AOC condemns hatred and anti-Semitism at pro-Palestinian rally. So this is AOC, just like Anthony Blinken, just like Chuck Schumer, just like all the crazed Zionists in the Democratic Party, was legitimizing the anti-Semitism hoax, which gave rise to MAGA fascism. Meanwhile, this is Hassan Piker loves him some AOC. Guys, AOC is good. Jill Stein, who got arrested, bad. That's the brain rot in the United States left right now. And this is why I'm looking more towards the international left. That's why you guys see I have more China commentators on. That's why I'm super into Pan-Africanism, what Ibrahim Traore is doing, what the Chinese communists are doing. I'm like the U.S. left is so fucking beyond cooked, guys. Like I'm not just calling out John Piker because he's not like that's influence. He's the one who's got people who supporting people like AOC. AOC slams anti-Semitism on the left. I know AOC voted for. I don't have it saved. I wonder if I find it. Resolution. Oh, here it is. Once again, Black Agenda Report is on it. AOC votes to back Israel's lobbies. Bogus anti-Semitism definition. Meanwhile, Hassan is doing streams with her. She's being normalized on the left. This is the genocidal Democratic Party. And this is why we need to see more people protest AOC. We need to see the Obama continue to be called out because of what they enabled in the Democratic Party. This is someone else who Bernie Sanders endorsed and normalized. The Vanguard. Remember the Vanguard? The Vanguard was the biggest John Fetterman supporters in the world. And they would make all these. They used to make all these diss videos about us because we used to criticize John Fetterman. That's when they were like, "Oh my God, do you know RBN is right wing Jimmy Dore grifters? RBN, they want to destroy the progressive movement." And now those people are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I ever supported John Fetterman." Do you guys understand that there's countless people in the Bernie media industrial complex who hate my guts because I was right. I was right about AOC, I was right about Bernie, and I was right about John Fetterman. To show you guys the normalized racism in the Democratic Party, you had an expose in New York Magazine, some corporate media. They try to get rid of John Fetterman. He is mentally deranged. He's still suffering the result of his stroke. He's suffering from depression, which I wish the depression would win. He's literally mentally. They did a whole expose explaining how John Fetterman is completely batshit crazy. Even his wife was like, "Bro, your genocidal stance is batshit crazy." Even his wife, in his article, they explained how his wife was like freaking out, and then John Fetterman was extremely abusive to her, where he was telling her sister, "Shut the fuck up and get in line." Look at this. Fetterman went on to make statements that shocked people. In opposing a ceasefire, he said, "Let's get back to killing." He said, "Kill them all." John Fetterman, and he went on and said all these insane racist shit about Arabs, because that is what Zionism is. It's just inherently racism. And he said that we should kill them all. You want to know why people supported John Fetterman? TYT, Cal Kalinske. You remember Cal Kalinske? He was like, "This is the next Bernie Sanders." Breaking points, they loved him. Now they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe we could have never saw this coming. He had a stroke. Don't you know he had a stroke? The fact that he had a stroke, that changes personality. Don't you know when you get a stroke, that changes your personality and turns you to pro-genocide? That's not how it works. That is the talking point that people who should have no legitimacy left after supporting John. They say, "Oh my God, we support him when he used to be a progressive." Motherfucker, this video is actually older. This is an old screenshot. This video was about 2.5 years ago. This is like way before John Fetterman was even. They were joining the race with Dr. Oz. And you guys, I don't know. I saw OG people say, "I remember this segment." I was warning about John Fetterman, and I remember I took so much heat from having these viral tweets. I was calling out everybody. Like I was going after, I was Rachel and Cal. I was ratioing the Vanguard left and right before because their support with John Fetterman. And they was like, you guys are just using the Israel-Palestine issue as a way to cancel progressives. I will never forget that the argument that they made. Meanwhile, literally before his stroke, before his brain completely broke, when John Fetterman was 100% healthy, he was saying that he would lean in on U.S.-Israel's relationship as senator. Whenever he was asked, whenever he was given a chance, John Fetterman was explaining how important the Israeli relationship is to the United States. And as Kyle Kalinske, as the U.S. left was selling this person to their audience, they will always leave this part out. And they never covered it. I know. We did a few streams covering it. At my height of my feud with these people who now try to pretend that we don't exist, right? They hate us because we was right about them. And now you guys notice Vanguard, they hit 100,000 subs. They were just a normie DNC supporting channel now. After Aaron Mate destroyed their channel, they're now just a normie DNC channel because they lost all their credibility after supporting John Fetterman. And you guys notice that not one single high-profile Democrat official has come out to condemn John Fetterman after his unhinged. Like he compared Palestinians to sour milk. He said you can't reform a carton of sour milk, and you know his brain is broken. So that's like the most malicious insult that he can come up with his broken brain at the time. So he was saying unhinged, racist, anti-Arab, pro-genocide statements, and there hasn't been a single Democrat official who have came out. This story broke like 2 days ago to condemn John Fetterman. This is the party that Bernie Sanders and AOC is a part of. They are a part of a racist, genocidal party. A party that is so racist against Palestinians, they wouldn't even allow them to speak at the DNC to endorse their president. This is a party that deeply racist against Cubans, Venezuelans, Russians. They hate the Chinese. It's a fucking barbaric party that hates everybody who doesn't bow to the whims of U.S. imperialism. Which leads to our next segment, which is our main event. Michael Langley, he fucked up and started damn near a Pan-African revolution all over Africa. And this is the guy who I think he was demoted. I don't know if he was fired. I think he was demoted because he was accused of being a DEI hire by Pete Hegseth. What if I can find a receipt on that? Pete Hegseth, Michael Langley. I remember I saw like a lot of liberals melting down at this. Either way, the Democrat Party in Blue MAGA, they love this guy. We covered this guy the second he was hired. He was appointed head of Africom, the head Africom general. And when he was hired, I told you guys that this Negro right here is up to no good. I knew this motherfucker was up to no good the second I saw that he was hired. So Michael Langley has essentially created a wave of pro-African sentiment, of anti-imperialist sentiment, because after Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, now let's get back to the legend of Ibrahim Traore. Ibrahim Traore kicked out United States occupation and the French occupation, who only benefits from keeping Africa destabilized. So Ibrahim Traore, they put his picture up first. Being the legend that he is, he realized the scam of U.S. occupation because Burkina Faso, like many African countries in Western Africa, they were plagued by all these terrorist organizations. They are always to be found to be funded by they have weapons that come from the West. Meanwhile, despite the fact that Burkina Faso in this region has been terrorized by terrorism and jihadist militias and violent criminal gangs, the French in the United States had military bases because they said they were here to provide security. The fraud that every single sellout African leader has fallen for. So let me tell you guys this. Let me ask you guys a question. If the French in the United States is in Burkina Faso supporting a corrupt government, which they did. They supported a corrupt government that signed a bullshit security agreement where the France and the United States would occupy the country and control the flow of natural resources for security purposes. Meanwhile, these terrorist groups remained well-funded and their influence only grew. So Pan-Africanists and people like Ibrahim Traore, they asked themselves a simple question. Why are we being occupied by the West when they are not doing anything about radical violence? They're not doing anything against these terrorist groups. In fact, they are arming them. They are creating instability with their IMF loans, their debt slavery that they imposed on the African people. They put African leaders in charge and demand them to implement austerity on the African people instead of implementing actual socialist parties, which is more effective at uplifting the poor and the working class, which many African leaders wanted to do, but then they were victims of French and United States coups. So what Ibrahim Traore and what many of these Pan-African realized that these people are just leeches, and many of these leaders have sold them out to the West. Because these leaders, the leaders that Ibrahim Traore overthrew, they signed this bullshit security agreement. You guys realize that the security agreement that the previous fascist government that Ibrahim Traore overthrew, they wasn't, and this was outlined in the agreement, that they was not obligated to answer calls for help whenever citizens of Burkina Faso, whenever citizens of these African countries were victims of USAID funded. By the way, the Hundeyin was funded by USAID. That was revealed. Our friend David covered that as well. So you guys understand, under these security agreements, the United States and the militarized personnel there wasn't even obligated to engage against terrorism. So why the fuck are they there? So Ibrahim Traore kicked their ass out. And ever since he kicked them out, the West has been after him. They've been funding paramilitaries, and we are in cold red right now because the same people who almost assassinated Ibrahim Traore last year, they put a deadline. They said we are going to kill and we are going to assassinate Ibrahim Traore by June 2025. June 2025. These are the people who was caught in the coup working with the United States. Then they fled to the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast has a French-installed puppet president. The Ivory Coast is one of the many African countries that are still occupied by the French. Their politics is dominated by the French. French imperialism is still very much alive, which is why the West is panicking, because Burkina Faso is kicking them the fuck out. This absolute legend is kicking these people out. He couped the Western-controlled government of Burkina Faso, and now installing a government that is all about sovereignty, protecting their natural resources, and engaging in a one African strategy of sovereignty and of opposition against Western imperialism. So because of this, because all these moves that he has made against the West, against France and the United States, they want him dead. You had Michael Langley, I think this was a few weeks ago. He flew in the Ivory Coast to meet, let me see, I forgot the guy's name. What's the Ivory Coast president? This guy, I don't know how to say his name. This guy, Alassane Ouattara, he is a French puppet, piece of shit, garbage African leader, exactly which has plagued Africa for generations. The same way they have William Ruto in Kenya, who is sending, and you guys know that Kenyan police officers are getting smoked in Haiti. Why are there Kenyan police officers in Haiti? Because Kenya, William Ruto, against the wishes of the Kenyan Supreme Court, who ruled what he is doing unconstitutional, he engaged in authoritarian power grab, dismantled the power of the court, and then sent Kenyan police officers to fight the Western war in Haiti. You guys understand that Africa is plagued with these sellout leaders? Which is why the rise of Ibrahim Traore is a cause of amazing celebration. We're seeing the rise of a Pan-African movement that are rejecting these leaders, and now the entirety of Africa and the African diaspora is rallying behind Ibrahim Traore because they're tired of those sellout leaders. Especially after Michael Langley met with the president of the Ivory Coast in order to discuss security concerns. This was around the same time that this black imperialist, this black scumbag piece of shit, black capitalist. Do you guys see why I led with the black capitalism? You guys see what you guys realize that Michael Langley is beloved among the liberal establishment. The liberal establishment had a meltdown when Donald Trump demoted this guy. And despite the fact that he was just demoted by the Trump administration, he gave a speech at I think it's the Senate Foreign Judiciary Committee. Don't quote me on the exact committee, though. He was explaining, this was the headline that sent a firestorm around the world. And I know David said he was having some traffic problems. So if David doesn't make it, I will reschedule him. But I've been wanting to talk about this all day, so I can cook alone if I have to. So I will show you guys my hotspot brother David said. David, he sent me a message, told me he was in traffic. He may be running a little bit late. If he doesn't show, we will just reschedule him. Because I want to hear his point of view, because David been covering this very closely. And even if David doesn't show, you guys see, bro, I can rant on Africa all fucking day. Even if I'm not live streaming, I'm always in the lab cooking. I've been doing a lot of fucking reading on what the hell is going on in Africa. I've been studying this Traore story. I just haven't had a chance to do like a formal segment on it because it takes so much. There's so much information. There's so much history. There's so much conspiracy with this. I never had time to really sit down to do a segment on this, so I'm glad that we're able to do it on a Saturday for what's going to be a 2-hour stream, apparently. So big shout out to David. He told me that he's stuck in traffic. There was some personal issues, so we love David here. He's our hotspot brother. I showed this video in the beginning. This is a part of his coverage. I might just show you guys a lot of his coverage since he's not here. He said, special shout out to Michael Langley for unintentionally helping to bring Marcus Garvey's dream to fruition. Man has united Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, because, guys, you realize that there was protests in France and Germany among African migrants showing support of Ibrahim Traore after this bonehead made his statements, which we'll get through. Yeah, so like, bro, Africa is so, the propaganda that people are told about Africa is is so extreme. And many Americans have no idea what the hell's going on. Many Black Americans have no idea what's going on. They're being misled by CIA ops like ADOS and FBA that try to distance ourselves from our African brothers and sisters who want to welcome us in this Pan-African experience. That is what Pan-Africanism is. Recognizing we are brothers and sisters in the struggle against capitalism and imperialism. Yeah, I know. Sorry, you guys know I'm country as fuck. I read most of the time. That's why I pronounce a lot of stuff wrong. Yeah, Rome as a VP would definitely be my insurance. Diaspora. Yeah, no, I'm country as fuck. It's all good. Diaspora. Anyway, this is what David said. Dude could end up being the most consequential house Negro in human history. The fact that he's Black, that is what rallied people more than anything. This was a giant blunder. If you guys don't know, this guy Michael Langley accused Ibrahim Traore of mismanaging funds. He is the biggest clown house Negro of all time. I see my friend David join us. Welcome, my brother. Give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. I've just been ranting for the last hour and a half. I'm gonna bring you in here very soon. Let me finish this. I'll bring you in, David. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, we got David here, bro. This is gonna be a banger. This motherfucker Michael Langley had the audacity to say that Ibrahim Traore, I need to get my computer charged too, damn. He misuses his funds on security and military expenditure. You have a politician in the United States that's accusing another leader of spending too much on a security state. You know, the same people who built a police state, the likes we have never seen before, he is saying that, and he accusing Ibrahim Traore. Not only is this without merit, it's the exact opposite. He's ending exploitation, nationalizing industry, and reinvesting into the people. Meanwhile, Michael Langley, the Black imperialist, I need to get my charger ASAP. Damn. He is accusing Ibrahim Traore, and it's all projection. This is all the West have. But this is very disgusting because I know it's easy to laugh at this, and we know why. Oh, this could. Who will believe this, guys? There's these people who are brainwashed by imperialists, CNN, Washington Post ideology. The reason why Michael Langley says this is to dehumanize Traore and put a mark on Traore. He says this to decrease Western sympathy for when the assassination attempt that he wants to happen happens. So whenever Ibrahim Traore is attacked and killed, like the West want, so people in the United States, including Black Americans, can say, well, that's what you get because he's corrupt. You guys understand what this is for? Even though it's the exact opposite. But anyway, I want to bring David in. I know David has a lot to say on this. You know, this is our hotspot brother, an amazing investigative reporter with West African Weekly. Our friend here, I'm a big fan of your work. Thank you for joining us. Because you've been covering this what I describe as Pan-African revolution and Renaissance era in Africa. And this is the tweet that you sent out. And I've been covering this a lot. That made me want to have you back on again. Because great to have you on because you know a lot. And you've been discussing U.S. and Western intervention in Africa. You sent out this tweet explaining how Michael Langley, with the comments I was just explaining, sent out a firestorm that's helping to bring Marcus Garvey's dream to fruition. So that's a big statement, David. So do you mind explaining that? And once again, thank you for joining us on RBN. I want to get started with this. Can you explain your thought process and what Michael Langley did to cause this firestorm?
So the first and I think the obvious thing here, first of all, can you hear me properly?
Yeah, I can hear you. Chat, let us know how David sound is and everything. But go ahead. I'm going to watch chat. Okay. Make sure you're good.
So the obvious thing here is that Michael Langley is trying to do something similar to what was done to Gaddafi in the 90s and the noughties, which is narratively set him up. If you recall, at that time, the type of media that was prevalent was unidirectional media. It was media that existed in one direction. So there was mass media going from the owners of the world to the audiences of the world, and there's no other form of media that really existed. So the only information you had access to was the information that they let you have access to. And the information that they put out was that Muammar Gaddafi was a dictator, a strong man. He was a madman. He raped virgins. He executed people at will, like all sorts of accusations, if some even bordering on the absurd. I remember growing up. I grew up in Nigeria, right? And growing up in West Africa, hearing that there's this brute in Libya called Muammar Gaddafi, that this guy, he eats babies and he like all kinds of stuff, right?
They say that too because there's so much, and I'll let you continue, but there's so much, and this is what justifies imperialism is racism. They say whatever they want about North Korea because they know Americans will believe it. The same way you can say anything about African leader, and white suburbanites will just believe it because they saw it on CNN. But please continue. It's dehumanization. It's a great point. Please continue.
So the culmination of that process of narratively setting him up is what we saw in 2011, where the certain elements of Libyan society themselves were weaponized against their country, and they basically made it possible for the NATO invasion to happen, because without them, NATO wouldn't have been able to get hold of the onerous mandates that it did to bomb Libya 8,000 times in 9 months. All right, so they're trying to do something similar here, which is stir up the local populations. And how you do that is by, first of all, seeding a narrative. In this case, that Captain Ibrahim Traore is he's somehow not good for his people. He's somehow taking advantage of his people. He's using the resources of his country to benefit himself and not the people. The people deserve better and all that kind of stuff. I've been calling this out since last year, actually. So as you may know, I run a publication focused on West Africa and the Sahel. It's called West Africa Weekly. And we've had this conversation in our newsroom. We've been having this conversation in our newsroom since last year. And what we all agreed on was that there is a narrative effort going on surrounding the Sahel to paint a picture that isn't true. So one of the pictures, one of the elements of this picture is that somehow the people of the Sahel are worse off now than they have ever been.
Yeah.
Right. And so it doesn't immediately, like, this sort of psychological operation is kind of intelligent in the sense that it doesn't start from the obvious stuff, because you'd expect them to start from the obvious part of this guy has to leave, regime change. They don't start from there. They start from a position of concern. So if you recall, last year, there was this whole rash of news articles and documentaries focusing on Sahel, talking about how the people are going through so much, they're suffering terrorism, but despite all of that, the resilience of their human spirit and yada 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 yada. And that's where this thing started from, because that narrative had been seeded that, first of all, things are somehow worse now than they were maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which is not true. But that narrative seed has been planted. If you can successfully plant that narrative, then the next logical step in this process is to then claim that, well, now that things are worse, this is who is responsible for things being worse, right? Yeah. And now that you've established that this person, i.e. Captain Ibrahim Traore, supposedly is the one responsible for it being worse, then what does that logically mean? That if things are to get better, then this guy has to be taken out of power in some way, shape, or form. And if you can then progress the conversation in that direction, then the next logical step is what was done in 2010 in Libya, which is that the so-called civil society, dissidents, all these oppositional groups, which always exist in any society, then start to receive external funding. They start to receive funding from the US. So in Libya, it was something called the Libyan Transparency Association.
Yeah.
Right. which, as we now know, was basically a USAID thing, right? It was funded almost entirely by USAID, right? But at the time, it purported to be this sort of like Libyan diaspora initiative, people looking for transparency, people trying to hold the corrupt regime of Muammar Gaddafi accountable, and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's where it started from. And then I forget the name of the other entity, but it was a news platform which is also run from the diaspora. It was run from New York, and it purported to be run by the Libyan diaspora. It turned out to be basically yet another American operation, and it started pumping these narratives into this news cycle, which became very popular among younger people in Libya. And that was I guess the major failing of the Gaddafi government, is that it didn't recognize on time the danger of what was happening. Yeah. And it also didn't recognize the extent to which these guys had made narrative inroads into Libyan society using media and civil society. Bear in mind, at the time, social media wasn't really a thing the way it is now.
Right.
So back then, CNN still had the capacity to dictate the narrative, right? Back then, if CNN said something, it was like God had said it. It was the truth.
I told you guys, Western propaganda had the world under a fucking grip for a very long time.
Yeah. So if CNN said Gaddafi is a brute, and here I was, a kid growing up in Nigeria, and bear in mind that before the efforts of Gaddafi, Africa had no satellite system of its own, and Africa had to rent usage of European satellites and pay heavily for it every year. And then Gaddafi launched Africa's first satellite system, and as a result, we started having cheaper access to telephony and internet and all whatnot. And I was a beneficiary of that in West Africa, and yet I believed that Gaddafi was the worst thing ever, because that's the chokehold.
Yeah.
The informational chokehold that CNN had on us. And that's why I say it was the failing of the Gaddafi administration, because
and that's why things are different now. And that's why I want you to continue, David. But isn't that why things are kind of different now? Because we had an entire generation that's seeing the tricks of the web. But yeah, go ahead, David. Please continue.
So the parallel that can be drawn between what happened in the Gaddafi era and what is happening now, obviously, as I've mentioned, there's that attempt to narratively seed the Burkinabe population, the West African population, and the African population in general, because bear in mind, this isn't just about Burkina Faso, obviously. The powers that be have calculated, very accurately that Ibrahim Traore is more than just a leader of Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traore is basically the de facto president of Africa right now.
That's so crazy. That's so based.
As far as young, bear in mind, this is a continent where the median age is like 19. It's by far the world's youngest population, right? Yeah. And he's the youngest leader. He's the youngest head of state on the African continent. He's 37. So this is a continent which statistically is a Gen Z majority continent. He is a millennial head of state, and he's by far the youngest. The vast majority of African heads of state are boomers, not even Gen Xers. Like, there's just this huge generational gap. So the powers that be have realized that, first of all, visually and narratively, this guy is connecting with the vast majority of the African population far better than any of their old puppets that they have in place. And that in addition to his narrative efficacy, the fact that he's actually getting things done, it's not just talk. Things are happening. There's shovels in the ground in Burkina Faso. There's visual development taking place, and in a few weeks or so, or months, when some of these projects start getting commissioned and whatnot, you're going to start seeing all manner of videos and stuff flying around, and it's going to become even more apparent that the poverty and the lack that Africa exists in is completely artificial, and that all it takes is a few years of half decent leadership anywhere, and you could have this too. And they've realized that once Captain Traore's leadership in Burkina Faso sparks that mind shift across Africa, all their puppets across the continent are dead. They've realized that.
It's so
for that's why, even though there's 3 leaders in the Sahel who are in that alliance, that's why Ibrahim Traore is such a narrative target for them. That's why he's the focal point, because they've realized that in order to reverse this African awakening going on, we need to destroy this guy.
Yeah.
Like, this guy is the guy who has captured the imagination of a continent full of 19-year-olds, right? And if we don't catch this now, this is a runaway train, and we're not going to be able to stop it. So, having said that, where Gaddafi failed, to an extent, I do have to say, even though we live in the internet era now, information is a lot more multi-directional. CNN no longer has the power to dictate narratives for anybody. We can have conversations like this, and we can have thousands of people watching. So we basically have the ability to be our own CNN, which was not a thing in 2011 or 2010. But despite that, I have to say that to a limited extent, the failings of the Gaddafi government can still be observed to a limited extent within the AES, and specifically within the Traore government. And what I mean by that is they don't seem to have realized that having a public face that tells their side of the story or their narrative to the world in English, which is by far the most spoken language in the world, is not just a nice to have, it's a core necessity. They don't seem to have realized that yet. So they're planning to open a pan-AES radio and TV station later this year. But from what I gather, it's still planned the project is planned to be done in French. So what that does is that it limits the audience automatically to the Sahel and French-speaking Africa.
Right.
Meanwhile, if you're really trying to drive that global narrative, whether you like it or not, English is the most spoken language in the world. It has to be in English. It has to transcend French. French is kind of like it's a straitjacket that they've been put in. And I don't think they've realized that yet. That right now, they've kind of ceded the narrative or the information space to people like us who mean well, right? But the disadvantage of that is that where people like us, you and I, we might have that journalistic rigor of actually digging out facts and, doing research before putting stuff out. I've noticed that a lot of other people who this space has been ceded to, they don't have that rigor. So they just go do some AI thing, create fake stories sometimes. You just hear things. Captain Traore has banned porn in Burkina Faso, which is not true. Captain Traore has made education free at all levels, which is also not true, because this is a gradual process. They do these things, and what that does is that you then get an AFP or an AP or New York Times or someone coming in and saying they're doing a fact check on all this stuff. I don't know if you saw a story that was serialized across Nigerian media yesterday. It was a story by AFP. AFP is a Gen France.
I think I know what you're talking about.
It's a French news agency, which is basically funded by the French government. It's a government mouthpiece in France. And they put out a story saying that Traore's growing popularity in Nigeria is driven by Russian fake news.
I think here it is. Let me find it. I think I have it. Let me show you guys. Yeah, this is I'm gonna pass it right to you because you were explaining. They're essentially Russiagating. If I can get this down.
Yes.
The load. Here it is. They're essentially Russiagating the entirety of Russia, which is a concept I explained on RBN many times before. This is how white liberals convince themselves to support imperialism in Africa. Conservatives in the United States, they all down for. You don't have to convince them to do some shit in Africa. But liberals, if you can convince them that black people are stupid and easily manipulated by the Russians and the Chinese, then you get them in. Let me read the headline. I passed right. You're cooking right now. I love the lesson that you're giving us. So let me read the headline, and I'll pass it right to you for your thoughts. Nigerian, and it's from your website, I believe, West African Weekly. Yeah. Make sure you guys check out his website, West African Weekly. Here's one of their headlines from yesterday. Nigerian media amplifies French-led disinformation campaign falsely attributing Traore's popularity to Russia. So the only reason why black people like Traore is because we were tricked by the Russians.
Mhm.
Anyway, please continue, David. I love the lecture you're giving us.
So there's been some success from the parts of the usual suspects in trying to seed this narrative. But as I said, we don't live in 2011 anymore. What we have now that we didn't have then is the ability to push back. And I had an editorial meeting with my newsroom about this, and I was very clear that we don't play defense, right?
Yes.
We're not going around trying to put out fires. We play offense, right?
Exactly.
So if you're seeing a French disinformation campaign, you don't start trying to like individually fact check every individual thing, like so and so claim was made, this isn't true, so and so claim was made, that isn't true. No, you go all out and you say this is a French disinformation campaign. The exact way they come to you and say you are stupid and you believe this because Russia put it in your head. You flip that and point it right back at them, and you learn to become as unapologetic as they are. And that's how. So that's the ability that we have now that we didn't have a decade and a half ago. A decade and a half ago, someone could just scream information at you. You had no way of returning it with interest. So whatever they said was what was true. Now, as they push a disinformation campaign in West Africa, you have platforms like West Africa Weekly that can push back and say this is a French disinformation campaign, and then go further than just making that accusation, can actually prove it, like we did in that story. We actually showed the receipts. This is who is behind it. This is AFP. This is where AFP gets its funding from. They get 1/3 of their annual funding from the French government, per their own disclosure, right? So this is a government mouthpiece. How can you trust a French government mouthpiece to be objective on a story that deals with anti-French, anti-colonial revolution? They have invested in. There's a clear conflict of interest there. So they're not being honest. And then the journalist who was hired to write the story, a guy called Samad Uthman, this is a guy who has been implicated in this exact kind of foreign interference thing before.
Really?
So this was earlier this year. I don't know if you heard about this. Some shadowy NGO called the Center for Information Resilience, which, as you would definitely not be surprised to know, was funded by USAID.
Is this it? I know you did a video. Is this the video you did on it? This one here?
Yes.
All right, cool. But go ahead. Please
Yes,
explain. Please explain.
Yeah. So this guy who wrote this story, Samad Uthman, was actually one of those journalists who was hired to write smear pieces about myself and other sort of non-Western aligned voices in West Africa, and it was going to be paid £1,000 sterling per quarter. That's about £333 a month. So in dollars, that's like just under $500 a month, because apparently that's how much a Nigerian journalist is worth. So basically pay them $500 a month to write a smear piece, or to write smear pieces about people that they don't like and accuse them of being Russian-sponsored, Kremlin-sponsored, Russian-aligned disinformation, all the
they sleep at night, man.
words.
That's so disgusting, man. But anyway, please.
Yeah.
That's just so disgusting. I don't know how they sleep at night, but please continue, David, because we see that a lot here. We was accused of being Russian agents at RBN. Our brother Chairman Amali of the Huru Black Socialist Movement, who stood for peace in Ukraine, he was smeared as a Russian agent, in the Biden administration when they give him 20 years. So you guys see how they use the same strategy over and over again. But please, David, please continue.
Yeah, I followed that story quite closely, and it's kind of similar to what they did to African Stream, which I also work with.
Yes.
Right. What's his name? Anthony Blinken just climbed the stage one day and said African Stream is run by RT. Next thing we know, they get shadow banned to hell and get kicked off every platform.
Yeah,
except
I covered that.
Kicked off YouTube, all Meta Facebook platforms, kicked off TikTok, and basically they're just left on Rumble and Twitter.
And think about how fascist that is, guys. You have a Secretary of State for an imperialist genocidal war machine who can just make an accusation. Like, it wasn't proven. You can just make an accusation accuse someone who's critical of your foreign policy, call them a Kremlin agent, and they get debanked, they get financially destroyed, and they accuse Trump of being a unique authoritarian. That's what Democrats do too, guys. But please continue, David. Great points.
So we have the ability to push back now, and we are using that ability, which is why this narrative attempt is failing. And another facet of this failure is the fact that in trying to seed this narrative, which is what Michael Langley was trying to do when he made that comment, he did two things. First of all, he completely misread the situation and underestimated the extent to which Ibrahim Traore's message is resonating across the continent. Completely underestimated that. And then secondly, ended up actually sparking off the counter narrative that they were trying to preemptively put out. Right. So what they were trying to avoid, and I know this because I used to, be very close to people in these circles, right? What they don't want to see is action on the streets. They don't want to see people doing marches and protests, like directly addressing like US imperialism. They don't want to see people burning US flags. So that's like very clear symbolism. They don't want to see any of that, because once that happens, then they know that they're on the back foot in terms of the African narrative. They know that they no longer control the narrative and that they're playing catch up. They don't like playing catch up. They don't like playing defense. They always want to be on the offense. But, unfortunately for him, unfortunately for us, that's exactly what he ended up doing. He ended up basically setting off the very thing that they were trying to avoid. So he's now, I would say, one of the most famous Black people in the world for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Look at this headline. This headline, because he's so popular in Nigeria, this is what Western media is saying. They're saying the reason why he's popular in Nigeria because disinformation. Like the West is in full panic mode, not only because of his rise in his own country, but how the entire African continent is rallying behind him. But please continue, David.
So I was actually referring to Michael Langley when I said he's one of the most popular Black people in the world right now for all the wrong reasons. Because something else that I guess the powers that be completely underestimated is the extent to which, whether deliberately or by happenstance, people have become educated about how empire works, and the fact that when an empire is trying to destroy an African country, the same tactic is used all the time, which is a fellow African or someone that looks like an African is always the spearhead. So in the case of Gaddafi, it was Barack Obama who was US president at the time.
Yes.
In the case of like every single time there's been like a political assassination or a coup, that has derailed a revolution anywhere in Africa, it's been another African who was the spearhead of that. So when Thomas Sankara was killed in Burkina Faso, it was his close friend and associate, Blaise Compaoré, that was used by France to do the dirty job. When Sylvanus Olympio in Togo was taken out by France, the person who did the dirty job was his fellow Togolese person, Gnassingbé Eyadema, who later became president for 56 years, and then basically willed the country to his son, who is now the president too. So that's always the situation. Several instances in Nigeria where military governments that had some sort of revolutionary potential were taken out by military officers who were on the payroll of CIA. That happened in Ghana as well, when Kwame Nkrumah was taken out by a group linked to JB Dankwa, who was a CIA operative. That's how it always is. It literally, the tactics never change. So the same thing is clearly being seen now, where you're seeing this guy, Michael Langley. He's clearly a Black man, clearly a son of Africa, 5 or 6 generations removed. And he is clearly offering himself to be the vessel through which an attempt is made to not just demonize Ibrahim Traore, but to kill him, because that's the ultimate endpoint of this. The same way the goal of going after Gaddafi was not to get him out of power, it was to kill him, and to kill him in a very public and a very humiliating way, to send a message, right? something that I think has fallen into a bit of a memory hole is that after Gaddafi was killed, the level of triumphalism that was prevalent across Western media, the sheer glee with which this was being reported. We saw all those pictures of him being sodomized, his dead body on display.
Yeah.
All of that wasn't by accident, right?
Yeah.
That in itself was also part of the psychological operation to instill fear in the hearts of anyone who had revolutionary ideas, that this is what happens if you go down this road.
And he
End
saw, he
up-
died. Hillary Clinton said.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, she did.
That was
Yeah, and she
like,
said so,
that haunted me.
laughing
Like,
and cackling.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
and there was a guy who I forget his name. I'll pull up the headline. He wrote for the Atlantic, and he wrote a headline something along the lines of that will show these Pan-Africans. So something along those lines, that Pan-Africanism is a terrible idea, and I hope now that Gaddafi is dead, they will leave this idea, And then this is a white guy, writing this stuff. So the goal wasn't just to get Gaddafi out of power; it was to send a message to Africans, right? And you can clearly see that this fellow Michael Langley was trying to offer himself as a vessel for the same thing to be done to Ibrahim Traore. So something, and I'll just quickly close with this: that what I think the empire has completely misread and miscalculated this time around is the level of influence or credibility that it still has in the hearts and minds of people. People no longer care whether there's a respectable white guy with plenty of symbols and alphabets next to his name who says that this person is a dictator, this person is not good, this person is a Marxist, is bad at economics, it's this, it's that, it's a dictator, he closes off the civic space, it's bad for human rights, all those talking points. People no longer care, right? Because we have heard these narratives all our lives. And at the same time, in parallel to hearing all these narratives, we see some of the worst dictators in the world still in power across Africa, and they have excellent relationships with the same Western world that has all of these things to say about anyone whose goal is to improve the lives of African people, right? Because while you're calling Gaddafi a brute, a dictator, he drinks the blood of virgins and eats babies for breakfast. While you're saying that, on the other hand, you have someone like Mobutu being your lackey. Mobutu was, I don't know what the type of adjective to use to describe the type of brute that fellow was, but he was best friends with the US. They had no problem with it. They have no problem with Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power in Uganda since 1986, which is 4 years before I was born. They have no problem with that dictatorship. They have no problem with Paul Biya, who's been head of state in Cameroon since 1979. They have no problem with him. They have no problem with the guy in Equatorial Guinea. I think Teodoro Obiang is his name, I think he's been in power 42 years as well. They have no problem with him. They had no problem with the guy in Gabon before he was taken out in a coup, and the new guy who is also a lackey, who is transitioned himself from a military leader to a civilian elected leader with 92% of the vote. They have no problem with it. In fact, Trump dispatched his special advisor to Africa to meet with him a few days ago, and that guy put out a tweet saying, "This is a what's the term he used? This is a milestone, a democratic milestone for a guy who took power in a coup and then transitioned himself to a civilian president using what's called sham election." And the American government said this is a democratic milestone. So people can clearly see that the empire is full of shit. People can clearly see it, that the only thing that matters is not it's not all this stuff about elections and human rights and all these talking points. What matters is, does this person have the intention and the capacity to make our lives better or not? That's what actually matters. And next to that, whatever anybody has to say is completely unimportant. Because, hey, you're going to say this guy he's this, he's that, he's the other. But people can clearly see that for the first, Burkina Faso has been the independence since supposedly independent since 1960. So as an independent country, it's 65 years old now. And in 65 years of independence, Burkina Faso had only 3,000 kilometers of paved roads in the entire country.
Wow.
In the entire country. I'm sure Brooklyn has more than 3,000 kilometers worth of paved roads.
Yeah.
Right? And an entire country had 3,000 kilometers of paved roads in 60 something years of supposed independence under the boot of France. Nobody had a problem with that. And then you can see this guy, he's coming in, there's a construction frenzy. He's building 5,000 kilometers. They're paving 5,000.
How dare he? Isn't he mismanaging funds? I was told by CNN. I thought CNN told me he was mismanaging funds, David.
So that's the issue. People simply no longer believe when these white guys with these credentials come out and say these things, or when the puppets of these white guys with these credentials come out and say these things. It doesn't matter anymore. So that's where the empire has severely miscalculated. The empire still thinks that this is 2011, and that just because someone from a Western institution is saying something, that means that everyone has to take it, or everyone is going to believe it. That's no longer the case. And as long as people like you and I are still very much in the game, that's definitely not going to be the case, because every attempt to misinform and misdirect the energies of Africans will be met with full resistance. This is not the way things used to be.
Yeah, you guys know I'm a natural revolutionary optimist, almost too much so. That's why you are making me extremely happy, because this is what I've been waiting for years, was the unification of Black people understanding that our enemy is the Western propagandists, the Western imperialism who exploited African lands, exploited our people here in the continent of America. So that's why I'm seeing all this. I'm seeing this fever for Ibrahim, and I'm seeing the rise of Burkina Faso is extremely, extremely exciting. But also the same reason why I'm also kind of afraid, because they want him dead. I explained before you got here how Michael Langley was meeting with the French puppet president of the Ivory Coast. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was last year. I don't remember the exact date, guys, but the closest he came to dying was assassination recently, where they were trying to turn people on the inside. They had an outside and inside strategy where they had people who were trying to take his life on the outside, obviously the paramilitaries, funded by the United States and the French, but then also turn people on the inside. And this is what made that recent assassination attempt so scary. And this is this account, and I want to get your thoughts on this as we'll be getting a wrap here soon. I very appreciate your breakdown of the situation. But I saw this story and I couldn't help but share it with my audience here. This is a bodyguard who's close to Ibrahim. And guys, they are pulling every dirty trick in the book, which is why I'm terrified. I'm glad that they've been able to, I'm about to say we, but I'm glad they have been able to stop all the assassination attempts. I believe it's around 20 that they have attempted thus far. But this is one where they offered a security guard $5 million to shoot Ibrahim Traore, and they offered him citizenship to any of these Western countries you wanted. They were about to hook this motherfucker up for life. Do you guys see where the North Korean traitors, whistleblowers come from, like the Naomi Park, whatever? They pay North Korean defectors millions of dollars. They live in all these nice, wealthy areas. They get free citizenship as long as you tell lies about North Korea. That's the same thing that's happening here. They were about to set this motherfucker up for life. 5 million citizenship. And you can imagine how they would treat him socially, that he betrayed his people. But this hero, he said, I asked myself, is 5 million worth carrying a guilty conscience to my grave? Will that money make me a king in a foreign land or a fool mocked by their sons and daughters? I'd rather live as a lion in the wild than as a dog in their city. This is the revolutionary ideas that Ibrahim Traore is spreading, how many, and David, I know you can attest to this, how many African sellout leaders took this offer in a different way? Obviously not the exact offer, but so many African leaders was more than happy to sell their leaders, their people out for a nickel and a penny. So I'm very scared. I'm very happy with everything what's going on with Ibrahim in Africa, but seeing the West throwing everything at Ibrahim, I'm terrified, and he will be. He need to be on our wish because the West wants him dead, especially as he ascends to rock star status in Africa. But Dave, I want to give you last thoughts. What's your thoughts on these Western attempts to continue to tackle? Any final thoughts you want to share with the audience regarding the situation in Burkina Faso? Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yeah, the important thing to note is that Ibrahim Traore is just the face. It's just the spearhead. It's just the tip.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Revolution in Burkina Faso. So, in fact, the coup that brought him into power was more of a revolution than a coup. It wasn't a typical African, military palace coup.
Yeah,
where some guy with external training and funding and support goes and executes a few people and that. No, it was the people who were rioting on the streets to get the previous guy out, and then he took control of the situation, and upon taking power, then asked the people, what do you want? What should our policy priorities be? What kind of government do you want? So I guess the mistake that the Western guys are making, which I hope they keep on making, is thinking that this was a top-down revolution. This was not a top-down revolution. It was very much bottom-up, right? He was a product. He was a product of revolutionary energy, and this process did not start in 2022. This process started right from the death of Thomas Sankara. This process started in the 80s. It was helped along by the growth of internet access and penetration in West Africa. And as everyone slowly became able to have access to high-speed internet and a cheap Android device, information saturation started to explode. And as that happened, that is when these revolutions started to happen. So getting rid of Ibrahim Traore would actually, as terrible as this will sound, and I certainly wish no harm on him whatsoever, and I hope nobody ever gets to him. But if somehow they were to get to him and they were to take his life, that would be the biggest strategic mistake that they could possibly make.
That's a good point.
All that would do is that it will prove our point beyond any kind of reasonable doubt. And then the revolution will go from bubbling under the surface to becoming fully kinetic and violent. It will happen. If Ibrahim Traore were to be violent,
they about to fucking do it too, man. I know they
toppled. They only think in one dimension, so it's their nature. They can't help it. They're not very intelligent, in some they're intelligent in some respects, but in some other respects they can only think in they're very one-track minded people. So they will no doubt try. But if Ibrahim Traore were to be killed, or like some sort of violent attempt made on his life, Western puppet presidents across Africa are going to lose their lives. Literally, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, dude, it's going to be crazy. Now that you mention it, it's going to be crazy.
The effects are going to go far beyond West Africa and the Sahel, right? There's going to be people in Botswana, right down there at the southern point, feeling the after effects of this. So, I mean, part of me feels like, under no circumstances should anything happen to Ibrahim Traore. But another part of me is like, the sort of Machiavellian part of me is like, you know what? Let them go ahead. Because if they do, that speeds things up even further. So, good luck to them.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. David, thank you for joining me, man. Like, you have a lot of knowledge in Africa. Make sure you guys check out his newsletter, his website, West African Weekly. You also released I showed one of them in the beginning of this stream. I love the videos you make with us at Hotspot as well. Follow him on Twitter. Great investigative journalist. Do you have any projects, anything you want to shout out in terms of what you're working on? And let me put your here it is. Let me put your Twitter up. Anything you're working on? Any final thoughts as we wrap up here?
Well, working on right now, I guess you might be aware of this. The sort of the biggest puppet in Africa, who's the president of Nigeria, I'm actually in court in the US right now. Well, that's not accurate because I actually won the case. I don't know if you're aware, there was a Freedom of Information case that was instituted against this guy. I was behind that case. Yeah, this guy he used to be involved in heroin trafficking in Chicago back in the day, and the U.S. government, as they do, indicted him but didn't convict him, and rather turned him into an asset and basically groomed him into Nigeria's president, where he has proceeded to become the most violently pro-US president in Nigeria's history. He's done everything that has been asked of him, by the IMF and the World Bank. He's the definition of an imperial puppet, like in the most stereotypical, like disgusting way. So I have been part of a process that has been pushing to get his records released fully without redactions. Earlier in April, we actually got a favorable judgment from a judge who is a Democrat. Funny enough, I wasn't really expecting much out of her, but who knows? So her name is Beryl Howell. And yeah, so we got a favorable judgment. The judge said the redactions are to be taken out, and the files are to be released in full. So from July, we're expecting to get the first tranche of files showing that the U.S. puppet president of Nigeria used to be some guy on Chicago's South Side, slanging dope. So yeah.
David, I appreciate you joining us. Make sure you guys check him out. Hopefully you guys enjoy this 2-hour Saturday stream. You guys know I like Saturday streams, like therapy for me in a way. So I'm glad I was finally able to do this segment on Ibrahim Traore. Nice hour-long segment on Burkina Faso. Appreciate you guys for watching. I'm trying to work on getting Kit from Heartlands Media. We got a lot of guests working on for next week. Give me a few days. I'll probably be back on Tuesday or so. Give me a few days. Make sure you guys like, share if you're watching the replay. Make sure you guys subscribe. I appreciate all you guys. Have a good weekend, y'all. Take care.